We're going to be looking at the topic of critical thinking. It's not so much the political sense of critical thinking, but rather critical thinking in terms of healing, in terms of psychological well-being, integrating some of the topics that we've been talking about. A woman named Ellen Pence put together the language that I'm going to use. I will tell you that I am the person who created the waves in this particular dynamic. Because in studying the work of Ellen Pence talked about a submerged state of being. And when we think about being under the water, we can certainly think about things that are dangerous and scary and that our health is at risk. But it can also be just that place where we go when things aren't going well, when it doesn't make sense, when we don't have a lot of support. And we have experiences, often traumatic experiences, that impact our life and our lives and keep us from being fully ourselves. So that's the idea of being submerged. And then there are times I'm going to do this really quickly on this little recap, but we filled this under the water area with all kinds of ideas about what happens when we have traumatic experiences and then we develop coping strategies or coping skills. I call them survival skills because literally they're usually keeping us alive. And we talked about how that can be kind of dissociation, it can be anger, it can be denial. There are many things that we do to really try to survive and maintain our lives in some sort of balance, but we're under the water, so we're always having to figure out breathing apparatus or how to get up for a breath or what. The skills that we develop are to keep us alive. So again, the water works for me as an idea of what it is that we're doing to keep going despite terrible things. And sometimes these are traumatic experiences done by other people, often people who are supposed to be loving and caring to us, but it becomes a traumatic experience. Sometimes it can be traumatic experiences like events in our lives that happen that are really nobody's blame, a car accident or an accident that happens someplace, but it leaves us with a sense of trauma. And so we're trying to heal, we're trying to work through our days, so we develop all these coping strategies. There's a handout here and it goes into more detail. Again, I'm going to do this really quickly. A lot of times when we're living down in this area, just coping strategy and trying to stay alive, we think if we just could get out of the water, it's going to be better. The problem is when we come out of the water, we're leaving behind some of the expertise that we've developed in these coping strategies. And so we go through a place of the split. And I'm somebody who believes in that we usually have many options. If we can just let ourselves open our minds and think of other possibilities, we can find several options to change our life, to make something better, to work through whatever. But when we hit the split, we really have only two choices. Or at least that's the way it feels to me. And one is to venture into the unknown. The other is to return to what's familiar. So a lot of times what happens is we come out of the water expecting it to be better. And it's scary. We don't know how to get here, so we come back. And this becomes kind of the rut that we get into, and a lot of times in our lives, and we don't know how to get out of get out of the rut. But if we can think about what do we need to venture into the unknown. This morning we talked about a towel. A towel would be good to get out of the water, venture into something different with some warmth, or a cup of tea, hot chocolate. All of those things are part of what I call creating safety, but I think it's important to identify exactly what that means. What will create this frightening time where we have to decide either to go towards something we don't know or return to the familiar? What do we need to venture into safety? If we can get here, then what happens is this next stage which is called the emerging stage. And I could do a whole training just on emerging, but to summarize, there are basically two concepts that we're looking at. Development of new skills, and sometimes these new skills are simply going back and looking at the coping strategies that we are good at and deciding what is beneficial, what's an area of expertise that's contained within that coping strategy, and how can I use it in a way that's more beneficial to me or healthier or stronger. We can take what we already know. We don't have to learn things all from scratch. We can take the basic knowledge that we have and we can make it work for us in new ways. And as we do that, oftentimes we need to connect with people that are going through either something similar or who understand us, or mostly who don't judge us. And so we have new skills and we have new support. And with these two things, we can go through this process of emerging. And the process of emerging, like I said, we could do a whole day on what that means and how different people emerge. But if you can think of coming out of the water or coming out of a place that wasn't the best and coming into something new, what do we need to grab on to the newness and make it part of our lives and stabilize us in a different way or see ourselves in a different way? All of those things are part of emerging. Emerging often takes us to the place of critical thinking because we are reviewing our life. We are seeing our life in a new way. So critical thinking is really taking the time to go through a process, and I named myself the process queen this morning because it's in the process, in doing the work, that we actually pick up more skills and strengthen the skills that we have. So critical thinking is actually the process of stepping back away from what's been in our face, what we've been dealing with, to take a look at our life from a different perspective. So we step back. And in this stepping back, we can take a minute to review the myths and misconceptions that we've integrated into our lives. We all have them. And to name them as, this may not be the truth of all my life. Maybe this was the truth when I was 6 or 7, when I had a teacher who made me feel like I was incapable of doing the work. But here I am in college, and I'm doing okay. I might not be a star student, but I'm doing okay. So maybe the myth that I'm not college eligible is something that I learned from an experience when I was young, but it's not something I have to carry with me for the rest of my life. I can start seeing myself differently. I can start seeing myself as college capable, college success. What misconceptions do we have about ourselves or our lives or what we're supposed to be doing or how we're supposed to be doing? Is it the truth of how we want to move forward, or is it something that's holding us back because, although it seemed like the truth, now that I step back and look at it differently, maybe it's not the complete truth. Maybe there are some holes in the way that I'm thinking. And as we do that, we are kind of waiting for that moment of aha. And in that moment of aha, we see ourselves in a new way. And that new way gets confirmed with the development of new ways of understanding our life, our past life, understanding what the trauma meant, that we are not our trauma, that the trauma happened to us, but it doesn't define us. Aha! Something new that we can hold on to. And ultimately, the way that I like to describe this process of critical thinking is to say how we do it is what we get. I can say, I'm going to swim a mile. I'm going to build up my strength and I'm going to swim a mile. That's my newest goal. I'm going to swim a mile. And tomorrow I get up and say, I'm going to swim a mile tomorrow. I'm going to swim a mile tomorrow. And the next day I get up and say, boy, I had a long day yesterday. I'm going to swim a mile tomorrow. I'm going to start swimming so that I build up to swimming a mile. If I don't get into the pool, I'm not going to learn to swim a mile. So it's not what I say I'm going to do. It's not my intent, but what I do and how I do it will create the end result that I want. How I do it. If I get up even when I don't want to, get to the pool, swim a quarter of a mile, get out of the pool, the next day, swim a quarter of a mile, do that for a week. The next week, I get up, swim a half mile, build up. Maybe it takes 3 months to swim a half a mile, but if I continue to practice, get in the water, do the work, eventually, I'll probably get to a mile. And let's say I only get to 3/4 of a mile, and then it's like, I thought I could get to a mile, but I'm satisfied with 3/4 of a mile. That's good for me. If I can do that 3 times a week, I'm good. So we change our goals, and we're flexible with that. But the key is doing it, for one, and how we do that, and the self-talk that we give to ourselves. Are we connecting this with these things so that we understand and we're really operating from our strengths, or are we connecting this with what's under the water and keeping us submerged? How we do things is representative of the end result that we're going to have. So the other thing about this chart is that I talked about the rut being a small cycle. I don't know how you stay up here. I can't. I absolutely can't. So what I want to do is learn to dive. And to do that, I have to remember to put my hands over my head. There's my little nose. There's my hair. Put your hands over your head and dive into the water so that we don't hurt ourselves. And yeah, we may be checking into some of these old coping strategies, but remember, I'm critically thinking about them. Maybe I'm developing some new skills. It's still under the water, but it's less harmful for me. I come out of the water, I hit the split. It's never fun, but I know now it's possible, and I have some new support and new skills to tap into so that I can get back into this place of critical thinking, step back, review the misconceptions. Aha! How can I do this better for myself? Oh dear, I can't stay there forever, and I take another dive. But you know, this time I get through the water pretty fast, and I'm back up here and reviewing my life. It's not something that says we're going to have to spend a whole lot of time in all these places, but maybe I go through a really horrible time in my life, and it just takes me a little longer to kind of get my bearings back together so that I can remember, because maybe I forgot, that I am capable. I can come out of the water and I can check in with these people that I've developed that are new support, or I can tap into my new skills, or maybe I have to develop even more understanding about who's there to help support me. But what happens is that my cycle is much bigger. And one time when I was doing this, I realized that's the way the whole solar system works. It's all one big circle. It's not a rut. It's a cycle that we go through, and sometimes we go through hard times, but we can help ourselves find a new direction. And part of that is doing the work of critical thinking. And I like to use the language that Ellen Pence gave us about submerged, split, emerging, and critical thinking. Thanks for watching.